Cliff Richard, born Harry Roger Webb on October 14, 1940, in Lucknow, India, emerged from humble beginnings to become one of the most enduring and beloved figures in British popular music. His early life was shaped by the final years of British colonial rule in India. His father, Roger Webb, worked for the Indian Railways, while his mother, Dorothy Marie Daisley, maintained the household. In 1948, as India gained independence, the Webb family relocated to England, settling in Cheshunt, Hertfordshire. The transition from the warm, vibrant streets of Lucknow to the post-war austerity of Britain was stark, and the young Harry had to adapt quickly to a new environment marked by rationing and economic challenges. From an early age, he developed an interest in music, particularly the burgeoning rock and roll movement sweeping across the Atlantic from America. Elvis Presley, Little Richard, and Jerry Lee Lewis became his idols, and Harry began imitating their styles while strumming a guitar given to him by his father. His natural charisma and striking good looks made him stand out among his peers, and by his mid-teens he was performing with local skiffle groups, a popular British genre that blended jazz, blues, and folk influences. In 1958, he adopted the stage name Cliff Richard. Cliff to suggest rock-like strength and Rinthulu Richard. As an homage to his hero Little Richard, this transformation marked the beginning of his professional journey. With the help of his first backing band, the Drifters, later renamed the Shadows to avoid confusion with the American group, Cliff began making a name for himself on the British music scene. That same year, he recorded his debut single, Move It, often hailed as the first authentic British rock and roll record. The song climbed the UK singles chart, reaching number 2, and announced Cliff Richard as the UK's answer to Elvis Presley. Over the next few years, Cliff and the Shadows dominated the British charts, producing a string of hits that combined energetic rock numbers with softer ballads, appealing to a wide audience. His clean-cut image set him apart from the wilder American rockers, making him especially popular among parents as well as teenagers. By the early 1960s, Cliff Richard had become Britain's first true rock and roll superstar, paving the way for the next wave of British acts, including the Beatles. His early career was characterized not only by chart success, but also by a rapid expansion into film and television, establishing him as a versatile entertainer. What made his rise so remarkable was the timing. He entered the music scene when Britain was still searching for its own identity in rock and roll, and he provided a homegrown alternative to the American sound. Through determination, adaptability, and an instinct for showmanship, Cliff Richard built the foundation for a career that would span more than 6 decades, earning him a place as one of the most successful recording artists in history. Cliff Richard's ascent in the late 1950s had already made him a household name, but it was in the 1960s and 1970s that he reached the true zenith of his career, solidifying his position as a cornerstone of British popular music. The early 1960s were dominated by his collaborations with the Shadows, whose tight musicianship and distinctive sound perfectly complemented his smooth yet energetic vocals. Together, they delivered a steady stream of chart-topping singles like Living Doll, The Young Ones, Bachelor Boy, and Summer Holiday. These hits were not just songs, they became cultural touchstones, tied closely to the optimism and youthful energy of the era. His involvement in films during this period further amplified his stardom. The Young Ones, 1961, and Summer Holiday, 1963, were not only box office successes, but also helped create the template for the British musical film, blending catchy tunes with light-hearted narratives. The soundtrack albums from these movies often topped the charts, creating a rare synergy between cinema and pop music that made Cliff a multi-platform sensation. His wholesome image and accessible charm set him apart in an age where rock was becoming edgier, as making him a safe yet exciting choice for audiences of all ages. However, the arrival of the Beatles and the British invasion in the mid-1960s posed a challenge, as the music landscape shifted toward more experimental sounds. Many thought Cliff's brand of clean-cut rock and roll would fade, but he proved remarkably adaptable. He expanded his repertoire to include pop ballads, gospel-inflected songs, and contemporary pop hits, allowing him to remain relevant even as trends changed. Singles such as Congratulations, which represented the UK in the 1968 Eurovision Song Contest, kept him in the public eye and demonstrated his enduring mass appeal. The 1970s marked a significant artistic and commercial resurgence. Cliff embraced a more mature sound, incorporating contemporary production styles without losing the melodic strengths that had defined his early work. Albums like I'm Nearly Famous, 1976, produced hits such as Devil Woman and Miss You Nights, songs that reached new audiences internationally, especially in the United States, where he had previously struggled to make a lasting impact. His ability to reinvent himself while maintaining his signature vocal warmth and emotional sincerity was key to his sustained success. By the end of the 1970s and moving into the 1980s, Cliff Richard had not only weathered the storms of changing musical tastes, but emerged as one of the few artists to enjoy multiple waves of popularity. His chart presence was astonishing. He had hits in every decade from the 1950s onward, a feat that few musicians in the world could match. In his peak years, Cliff was more than a pop singer. He was an institution in British culture, an artist whose songs were woven into the fabric of everyday life, from school dances to family gatherings. Despite his image as the eternally smiling, wholesome face of British pop, Cliff Richard's career was not without turbulence. For decades, he had carefully cultivated a reputation free from the scandals that often surrounded rock stars. But in the 2010s, his life was suddenly and very publicly upended. The most significant crisis began in 2014, when the BBC broadcast live aerial footage of a police search at his Berkshire home in connection with historical sexual assault allegations. The images, widely shared across the media, created a media firestorm and cast a shadow over his previously untarnished public standing. Cliff Richard strenuously denied the accusations from the start, and no charges were ever brought against him. After a lengthy police investigation, concluded there was insufficient evidence. Yet the impact on his personal and professional life was profound. He spoke openly about the emotional toll, describing feelings of humiliation, isolation, and anger, and what he felt was a trial by media rather than by a court of law. The episode tested not only his resilience, but also his faith, which had been a guiding force throughout his life. He admitted that even his deep religious convictions were strained under the weight of suspicion and public scrutiny. The controversy also raised broader debates in the UK about privacy, press ethics, and the balance between protecting alleged victims and safeguarding the rights of the accused. Cliff took legal action against the BBC, claiming their coverage had caused him immense distress and damaged his reputation irreparably. In 2018, he won a landmark privacy case, with the High Court ruling that the BBC had violated his rights. The victory brought him a sense of vindication, but he acknowledged that the scars from the ordeal would remain. While the legal outcome restored some of his public image, the crisis had lingering consequences. He withdrew from the UK charts for a time, spent more time abroad, and became more selective with public appearances. The years of investigation and speculation also meant that a generation of younger audiences first encountered his name in the context of controversy rather than his music, a shift that deeply saddened him. Nevertheless, Cliff's long-standing fans remained fiercely loyal, attending concerts and rallying around him during the ordeal. He often expressed gratitude for their support, crediting them with helping him survive one of the most painful chapters of his life. The controversy, while damaging, did not completely eclipse his decades of achievement, but it served as a sobering reminder that even a career built on clean-cut charm and goodwill could be shaken by public suspicion in the modern media era. Emerging from the shadow of one of the darkest chapters in his life, Cliff Richard's return to the spotlight was both an act of defiance and a reaffirmation of his enduring place in music history. After years of legal battles, media storms, and emotional strain, he resolved not to let controversy define the final stretch of his career. Instead, he channeled the pain into renewed creative energy, determined to remind the world of the artist he had always been. His comeback began with a quiet yet deliberate re-engagement with fans. Cliff planned small, intimate performances before returning to larger venues, carefully rebuilding the bond with audiences who had stood by him. In 2018, shortly after winning his privacy case, he announced a new album, Rise Up, which became both a symbolic and literal statement of his intent. The record was filled with themes of perseverance, hope, and resilience, clearly inspired by his own journey through public scrutiny and personal hardship. Touring followed, with Cliff embracing the stage with the vigor of a man who had something to prove, not to his loyal supporters, but to himself. He sang with a renewed emotional depth, his performances marked by moments where his voice would crack not from age, but from the rawness of the lived experience behind the lyrics. Far from shying away from his ordeal, he spoke candidly during shows about survival, faith, and gratitude, transforming his concerts into cathartic celebrations. The public response was overwhelmingly positive. Longtime fans welcomed him back with open arms, while sections of the media began to reframe his story as one of resilience rather than scandal. His autobiography, updated to include his battle with false allegations, became a bestseller, offering an intimate account of the emotional cost of fame and the strength needed to endure it. Cliff also diversified his creative output, collaborating with younger artists and experimenting with contemporary sounds without losing the classic melodic touch that defined his career. These ventures not only kept him relevant to a new generation, but also reinforced his adaptability, a rare trait for someone with a career spanning more than 6 decades. In interviews, Cliff often referred to his return as a second life in music. He credited his survival to a combination of faith, supportive friendships, and the determination not to be remembered as a victim. His comeback, in many ways, was less about reclaiming chart dominance and more about reclaiming his identity in the public consciousness. By the early 2020s, Cliff Richard stood not as a figure broken by adversity, but as an emblem of artistic endurance. His re-emergence served as a reminder that legacies are not solely defined by the storms they endure, but by the courage with which they navigate them. The comeback had not erased the pain of the past, but it had reframed his narrative, from one of suspicion and struggle to one of perseverance and triumph. Cliff Richard's legacy is not simply measured by chart positions or record sales, though those alone are staggering. With over 250 million records sold worldwide, more than 130 singles and albums reaching the UK top 20, and a career that spans over 6 decades, his impact on popular music is both profound and enduring. He remains the only artist to have achieved UK top 10 hits in every decade from the 1950s through the 2010s, a testament to his ability to adapt to shifting musical landscapes without losing his distinct voice. More than just a singer, Cliff was a pioneer who helped usher in the British rock and roll movement at a time when American acts dominated the airwaves. Before the Beatles transformed the global music scene, Cliff and his backing band, The Shadows, were already laying the groundwork for a distinctly British sound, blending rockabilly, skiffle, and pop in a way that resonated deeply with post-war youth. This early influence can be traced in the work of many artists who followed, from the Beatles themselves to contemporary UK pop acts. Cliff's contribution extended beyond music into television, film, and philanthropy. His wholesome public image during the early decades of his career provided a counterbalance to the rebellious personas of other rock stars, making him a favorite among a broader, more conservative audience. This positioning helped broaden the reach of pop music in Britain, making it more accessible to families and older listeners who might otherwise have dismissed rock as a fad for teenagers. His influence is also evident in the longevity of British pop idols who followed his model of reinvention. Artists like Elton John, George Michael, and Robbie Williams all employed variations of Cliff's strategy: evolve musically, maintain a core identity, and forge a personal connection with fans that transcends trends. Equally significant is Cliff Richard's role in charity and advocacy. From his work with Tearfund to his fundraising for famine relief and children's causes, he demonstrated that celebrity could be a powerful platform for social good. Many UK artists who became involved in charity singles and global humanitarian concerts in the 1980s and beyond followed a path he had already begun to walk decades earlier. Culturally, Cliff holds a unique space. He is both a symbol of nostalgia, embodying the innocence of early British pop, and a case study in endurance, showing how an artist can remain active and relevant well into their later years. His story has inspired countless musicians who face the daunting challenge of sustaining a career in an industry obsessed with novelty. Even in the face of personal and public adversity, Cliff's continued presence has cemented his role not only as an entertainer, but as a figure of resilience. Younger artists cite his ability to survive shifting public tastes, media scrutiny, and the pressures of fame as a roadmap for navigating the modern music world. In the end, Cliff Richard's influence reaches far beyond the songs he recorded or the records he broke. It lies in the doors he opened for British music, the example he set for professionalism and perseverance, and the way he proved that a pop star's career need not be fleeting. His journey is as much a part of Britain's cultural fabric as the music itself, a legacy that ensures his name will endure long after the final encore. Behind Cliff Richard's enduring smile, polished stage presence, and carefully maintained public image lies a chapter of deep personal sorrow that has shaped him as profoundly as his triumphs. While his career was marked by joy, adulation, and extraordinary achievements, his life has also carried a weight of grief that he rarely spoke of in public. Perhaps the most profound and enduring of these sorrows has been the absence of a family of his own, a loss not defined by a single tragic event, but by the gradual, quiet realization that certain dreams would never come to pass. Cliff never married, and over the decades he has spoken candidly about his decision to prioritize his career, his faith, and his charitable work. Yet in quieter moments, he admitted to feeling the sting of knowing he would never experience fatherhood, never watch children of his own grow, or see the continuation of his family line. This was not the product of one conscious rejection of love, but of many small choices, circumstances, and commitments that, over time, closed the door on that chapter of life. In interviews, his words carried both peace and melancholy, a recognition that one cannot have everything, and that the very dedication that gave him such a career also took something away. Adding to this private grief were the more public storms that tested his emotional resilience. The most devastating of these was the 2014 police investigation into historical sexual assault allegations, claims that were ultimately proven unfounded, but which caused immense damage to his reputation and deeply wounded his spirit. For a man who had spent his life cultivating an image of integrity and respectability, the experience was nothing short of shattering. He described it as feeling like his life had been turned upside down, as though decades of trust and goodwill had been swept away in a single wave of suspicion. Even after being cleared, the emotional toll lingered. The pain of knowing that some would forever associate his name with a scandal he did not commit was a shadow he could never fully erase. There were also quieter personal losses, friends and collaborators from his early career passing away, the end of close relationships, and the natural erosion of the social world he had known in his youth. Each farewell was a reminder of time's relentlessness. The death of his longtime collaborator and dear friend, Sue Barker, for example, left a void in both his personal and professional life. Similarly, the loss of members of The Shadows, the band that had helped launch his career, was a bittersweet reminder of the fragile nature of life's golden eras. Yet perhaps what made these sorrows most piercing was that they were born under the constant gaze of the public. Cliff had to grieve, heal, and maintain his dignity while the world speculated about his every move. There was no private corner where the pain could remain entirely his own. Fame had ensured that even his heartbreak was, in some measure, a public performance. And still, through all of it, Cliff Richard's greatest sorrow did not define him. It deepened him. The same man who stood beneath the lights in glittering suits also stood in silence with his losses, emerging not bitter, but with an even stronger sense of gratitude for the blessings he did have. In a career in life so full of applause, it was in the quiet moments of grief that his resilience was forged, proving that the measure of a man lies not only in his greatest hits, but in the way he survives his deepest hurts.